we had questions rise up. We've not actually reported back on that. So we're just going to do that briefly now. So we know that the Drinking Water Quality Assurance Rules 2022 and the building code require council to do three fundamental things. First of all, to conduct regular surveys to determine medium and high risk sites that ensure that the correct backflow prevention devices are installed at the boundary. Second, to provide for the testing of those backflow prevention devices as required for medium and high risk sites. And third is to actually keep a register of the testable backflow prevention devices. So the question that we said we would definitely come back on, so what's the district situation? It is as follows. The residential properties and other low-risk properties basically are all in compliance. The reason being because of the backflow prevention devices were installed at the time that the water meters were installed. They've been in situ now for upwards of 10 years. So when the water meters were supplied, the double check valves as a backflow prevention device were installed at that time. There is basically no issue there. The next one is the lifestyle properties. Effectively, they comply because of the storage tanks needing an air gap. And again, that situation is considered to hold widely across the rural community in our district. If that's not the case, then the other alternative water supply situation is a person's own bore or the fact that they've got rainwater tanks. Then we come to the commercial properties. Now, there's a number of commercial properties across the district. The assessment, though, is that there is around 300 medium to high risk properties where there's a non-compliant status. And for 185 of those, it's non-compliant because whilst they have a backflow prevention device, it's not up to standard. For the remaining 83 properties, they don't have any backflow prevention device. So you'll see on the slide that last statement's actually quite a critical statement. The key, though, is that it's not the bylaw that manages that non-compliance situation. It is actually the council's implementation plan for addressing non-compliance. And as it says there, that's completely independent of the bylaw. So in summary, our report back is that we're not facing a big operational risk relating to backflow prevention, certainly not compared to some of the councils that are not that distant away from us that have a huge difficulty in this space. We do not. Right through the country, there's
Can you use your microphone, Nigel? We do have some people online. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, just jumping in here. The 300 commercial, are they spread evenly? Is it?
I'll defer to our water services personnel.
Good afternoon. Yes, they're spread across the district. So yeah. So Parapara, Umu, Waikanai, Otaki, maybe a few in Kakariki.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. Yep.
So the big shift for us in terms of the way forward for the water supply bylaw relates to the local water done well. So just to recap, you're all aware of the fact that the bylaw was actually paused during the time that the Labor government was looking at the Three Waters reform. The reason being that it was reasonable to expect that the result would have been a shift away from council responsibility. With the coalition government, though, they've changed to local water done well. And we know that there is a likelihood, obviously now, even a clearer likelihood, that the responsibility for Three Waters would sit with council or a council organisation, and therefore the work on the bylaw actually resumed last year. As we briefed you and then went away, the more we saw the work developing on local water done well, and the more it was recognised the fact that the local government water services bill that was introduced in December last year and it's now before the select committee, due to be reported back on the 17th of June. It actually did propose some changes that would impact on the bylaw, or could potentially impact on the bylaw. And for example, there was in the draft legislation the thought of a 3-step process for approving water connections, and there was also the ability to use a bylaw for greater control over the access, the activities surrounding, and the contamination potential of drinking water catchment areas. So it's something that we don't have in the current bylaw that potentially we would look at when this legislation is actually through. So what we were basically learning over the very end of 24 and into 25 was that as the local water done well was progressing, it was becoming clearer that there would be new standards, that there would be new requirements, and they had the potential to significantly impact on the shape that was needed to make a durable water supply bylaw. So to continue, the uncertainty around local water done well, the standards and the requirements, creates uncertainty about what the best way forward for the water supply bylaw actually is at this time. And until the regulatory framework's finalised and the new delivery model's actually operative, there is a risk that if we did something now, that in the very near future, we would actually be putting it back on the table and needing to rework it. So Council is to decide on the new water services organisation on the 27th of May, and it would be ideal if that organisation, that is the front of the new delivery model, would contribute to developing a fit-for-purpose bylaw. So given that we're in this transitional phase and local water done well is a progressive thing, then we wanted to ask ourselves, or we asked ourselves this fundamental question a couple of months ago. And the question is it practical to progress a replacement water supply bylaw during the next few months that will cease to be effective when local water done well is fully implemented, or is it best to defer making a new replacement bylaw until local water done well is settled, and then we know what the content of our bylaw could be, should be. I just had a look on the website prior to coming, and that was because I was aware that the Porirua Council is also consulting at the current time on a collection of bylaw and policy changes, and they are addressing water supply within that. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to read exactly what they say on their website. They're proposing something similar to roll their current bylaw forward with minimal change, and they say the aim is to keep the bylaw valid until water reform requirements are finalised by the government, at which point they can conduct a thorough review of the bylaw. And I believe that's probably a pretty fair reflection of where we're sitting at the moment. So the next one is to, oh, sorry.
Nigel, can you just hold a sec? Because Liz was
Oh,
in
sorry.
the queue already.
You go.
Sorry.
Sure, you've been, I've been
Yeah,
red
sure,
lighted.
Liz, go for it.
Okay, yeah, look, I just wanted to confirm that the backflow issue is able to be resolved adequately without the teeth of a bylaw in behind it. From my reading of it, you've said that it's kind of in hand, that you've got a separate policy, but does that give it enough teeth to resolve it?
So the policy, I guess, is a more structured approach that we can then provide back to Te Mata Arawa in terms of compliance, and shows that the council's committed to that level of protection. And it also clarifies one of the issues is who pays for what, whether the property owner pays for everything in terms of protection to the boundary, or whether there's a greater public good in council funding some of that, because the backflow preventer actually prevents contamination getting into the public network.
Supply, yeah.
So some councils across the country fund more of the cost because of that. Others as we do, all of that cost sits with the property owner. So in terms of that, yeah, so I think at the moment I'd suggest we have adequate provisions to get people to put backflow prevention in. Nick's sort of
And
rolling
it's
his eyes a little
enforceable?
bit.
Is it enforceable?
Well, maybe you can answer. I think it is because we've been doing it for the last
Right.
however long. I've been here. We've been doing it.
Challenged it as such.
Yeah, but it's more about clarifying and confirming and making it more transparent for the future and for some of those medium risk sites that this is why we're doing it and this is the mechanism that sits over the top of it and that you're required to fund this, and then it's got to be annually, you have to have it independently audited in terms of performance. So it gives us a lot more, I guess, of a better starting point for that conversation with someone who's not willing to do that under the current structure. But in the time that I've been here, maybe Nick, I'm not aware of us having to have a fight with someone for them to put in backflow prevention, because normally you're talking about commercial. And again, it's often it's new properties. This is probably more assistance with existing properties where, they might argue, well, we don't see the risk as great. So that would be my view. Nick, do you want to?
Yeah,
Agree with me?
essentially, what you're saying is correct. Yeah, hi, Nick. Sorry, am I going? Yeah. So we're probably not being as proactive as we would with a policy in place. Like, there's a lot of properties out there, and until council's showing us that strong mandate, we're not going to go and send letters to every property telling them to, yeah. So that's essentially what we're looking for, I guess, in the policy. It's clear direction and it's funding to manage that on a district-wide basis rather than a one-off basis that we're sort of doing at the moment. We'll deal with when we've got immediate problems, and all the new subdivisions have got backflow going in. So we've been nailing that for the last 10 years. It's just the old connections.
And I guess it'll get resolved when you eventually do the whole bylaw review anyway, won't it? So
Yeah, and
it'll
we're
just
only
be a
talking,
transition period.
12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
It's really just, we got that date, that August 25. We're not saying we're going to push it out for 3 or 4 years. We're saying we're just going to get through that, get local water done well, sort of, and going in the direction that we know where we're going, and then you can get off into the process.
Okay.
You want to finish the briefing? Nigel's got one some specific, but I did defer. Can I get him to do that? And the others can wait until the end.
Well,
That's right.
Councillor Coe anticipated my question largely, but the only other bit to add on to that is what's the cost centre for the work? So is it 100% of the cost borne by
The customer.
the customer?
At the moment, that's the current approach.
Yeah, often if a property doesn't have backflow, it's probably the existing middies underground, and so typically we'd want to bring that above ground because that's where backflows need to be if they're RPZs. And because we're doing a meter at the same time, we've been arranging to do 50% with the property owner because a lot of the cost is in bringing it out of the ground, and that's sort of what we've been doing typically on a one-off basis. But
Okay.
I guess it depends on the solution. If you've really got a meter, or what, because obviously the metering side of it is our responsibility. But if it has to go into a valve, it has to go into a setup that requires that to be brought out of the ground, then we share the cost. If you don't have to do any of that and it's purely the backflow, then likely they'd fund all the cost.
I just might note as we get into a preferred option that just reflecting on the discussions that we had initiated with you last year, signalling that we are going to be focused on, I'll say, being more proactive in the space is an advantage of the approach on the table. So obviously today we're talking about the fact that we will be, and so it gives people a chance to make sure that they are aware and ready in these tight recessionary conditions for discussions with us on that basis.
Thank you. So giving attention then to this little diagram, we've got a start point at the bottom. So we're going to work from the bottom up. The bottom is just to let the bylaw lapse, have nothing in place, and just address it at some time in the future. That's not recommended because of the fact that there is a significant operational risk and perhaps a reputational risk. It may not occur, so relatively low probability of something really turning to custard. But if it did happen, the impact could potentially be very significant. So we quickly take the letting it lapse option off the page. Options 2 and 3 are effectively like looking at a rework of the bylaw, one with the backflow prevention being in a separate policy, one with the backflow prevention in a sort of a cut down kind of version actually being within the bylaw itself. The issues with those is, given the timing between now and August, that's not a lot of time to put in place or do the necessary consultation work on the bylaw. And so there's a possibility that it would be beyond the expiry period. So we would be running with some period of time, weeks or months, we don't know, without a bylaw. So that's not a good thing. The second thing is, of course, as we mentioned, is it's not going to be an enduring solution because we don't know what local water done well is actually going to look like.
I think just to note that also from a fiscal prudence perspective, we're obviously thinking very hard about where we recommend to you the need to consult, because cost comes with that, and mindful of our comments about that 12 to 18 month period. We think there's a benefit financially with the next option that Victor's going to chat to you about, without it causing undue risk in other ways.
Thanks, Chris. So the option that is preferred is the first option, which is to readopt the bylaw, roll the bylaw over. That's the notion to it. The benefits is that there would be no change in the current situation. There's no notable increase in the risk profile or anything like that to keep things going. The benefit is, as mentioned, cost consideration and also that notion of that one step forward. So if you go to the final slide, and we'll just work through this. So in light of local water done well, readopting the 2013 bylaw seems to us, and we're representing this as a pragmatic and an efficient transitional step. But please note, it poses no added operational reputational risk, and our water services colleagues have talked about Tamata Arawai. They're aware that council isn't fully compliant currently in the backflow prevention status. They're aware that there is this implementation plan approach to keep progressively improving, and that's part of business as usual. That's already in place, and so that's a good thing. The readoption without amendment is achieved easily achievable before August. The next one is that it allows for a streamlined one-step process towards the new fit-for-purpose water supply bylaw, aligned with local water done well, and in the situation where the new water organisations stood up in place and can be directly involved in that. And the final point is that the decision to readopt the 2013 bylaw is to be paired with, coupled with, taken with the decision to review it and starting to look at that in 2026, 2027. So the next steps would be for us to notify stakeholders, persons that are actually in the business, including developers, that this is council's intent, and then look at council approval perhaps in June of this year, the end of June. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got just a couple of questions there. So, Rob.
Oh, thanks. Victor, thanks for that. Hey, just a quick one. The 300 non-complying sites, industrial sites, 83 of them are not adequate or non-compliant. Why don't they have water meters? Because that's a backup, isn't it? That's a, does that not stop that's a, backflow prevention?
No,
It's not, right.
water can go
I
back
thought-
through a meter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, does it go backwards, the meter?
They can, but they can do.
Oh, thank you, that's.
So, I mean, backflow's not that common in like our network's fully pressurized most of the time, but if you do get a burst or we're allowing for a situation that doesn't occur often, but if it does, it's got a high impact. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So, couple of questions. In terms of these properties that don't have a black backflow thing in place, are they aware of it or not?
Probably most of them won't be at this point. Yeah, like some of them will be schools. Some of them will be our own. Probably maybe half of them are. I don't know.
I think I might just add to that to say that I think the earlier comment about we intend to become more proactive would be fair to say that our intention is that as we head into the next 12 to 18 months, I think the team will be slowly but progressively working through that list.
Yeah, because the reason I asked that is, so you talked about the risk is not going to change, which I want to ask another question about that in the short term. But when there's some comms that goes out about readopting this bylaw, I personally think it would be a good idea is sending a letter to each of those owners to say that we've identified that you don't have this backflow meter in place, and something about trying to sort it out basically. Because I suppose in terms of if they don't know, I think, and if something happens, then the risk is with council. But I think if you actually let them know, then that puts the onus on them.
Thank you. We will take that offline, leave it with the team. And when we close the loop and come back to you on our next steps, we'll make sure that that we follow up on that point.
Yeah, so I have another question. So it talks, the comment is made in here that the risk profile isn't actually going to change. My question is, where is that risk? And I think someone made the comment, I think Ben might have made the comment that the likelihood and the magnitude, what is the likelihood and what is the problem if it does actually happen? Because that might help work on contacting these properties that do have an issue.
Okay, so the starting situation for those properties can vary. It's based on the records that are held. The risk is not about like who the property owner is or what the building is or anything like that. It's about what is the activity going on in that property as of today.
Right.
So the first thing to start with is actually appreciating that. Second thing is that some of those activities of necessity have their own backflow prevention systems within the on-site reticulation system of the water, but it's not backflow at the boundary. So some of the council's own sites where there is a backflow prevention issue known at some of the pumping stations, the situation may simply be to remove the taps or to tap the taps so that they're no longer usable as a tap. So the starting point is this quite mixed bag of situations. The thing then is that if the risk occurs as in a contaminated, so there could be water go back into the water supply network, it's the degree of contamination with that water that is of concern, not the fact that it's just simply water going back that's as healthy to drink as the potable water supply going onto the property. So again, that risk is dependent on what the activity is in the property, and the degree to which that then flows through the system to other outlets. Now, one of those outlets could be a school, and it could be the water that's going into the little drinking fountains, and a child could get sick, as we know has been a historic case in the Bay. So when children are getting sick because of drinking contaminated water and it's traced back to inadequate backflow prevention, then there is a likelihood, and this is where the profile comes in, and because then there's a likelihood to finger point in any source as to who is to blame and why they're to blame, etc. And that's where we're saying that there is the potential for things to go to escalate, and then all of a sudden you might have Taumata Arawai knocking at the council's door saying, why did you let this go? Your implementation plan wasn't adequate, or whatever it might be, despite their continuous involvement to date. So that is the point that we certainly wouldn't want not to have a bylaw in place.
Yes.
Because of the fact that would be seen potentially as being very irresponsible with community health, public health, population health.
So I certainly understand the bylaw is important, but it's about how it's implemented. And I think in terms of, like, I don't know, whether we've got backflow meters on our properties or not, but if people don't generally know and they get a letter or some communication saying that it does, then as I said earlier on, the onus is put on them to actually, if anything goes wrong, rather than council. And particularly if it's going to take a while for this bylaw to be updated, to me, that seems like a reasonably good short-term approach to take.
I might note two things. I hear some interest in the 83 and what that looks like in terms of the risk profile. So we'll take a note of that and provide you with some back pocket information before we bring a paper back to the table for decision. And I think secondly, we've noted the point about letting people know, and we will come back to you and close the loop. So noted those points. I might add, and I might just the team can correct me when I get this wrong. We have had our water meters in place with backflow prevention, which looks like the majority of our network, and we are in a good position. I think we are blessed in Kapiti that we have really looked after our network and taken steps to put the right things in place, which I think was alluded to as not the case in some of our neighbouring districts, and certainly across the region. So I might just make that point. And I think that was the nod to the risk that we face, as we know the risk profile. Certainly this doesn't make it any worse off. And I think if we had high concerns that our community was at extensive risk, we would certainly not be leaving that there. So I can make that assurance, but I might hand over to the team. As I said, if you want to correct that, let's go for it.
No, that's all sensible. I guess that was part of the whole backflow policy, was there to set that direction, and was council happy for that to be all customer funded? Were they wanting to contribute in some way? And so to send out letters without having that council mandate was something we probably, as our team, wasn't prepared to do until we had that clear direction.
I think the point, though, of just signalling that there is an intention to hold a discussion about backflow prevention, and that we've identified that it is an issue for a site, as a start in that conversation rather than it being a surprise. And I think when we talked to you in 2024, that was something you were concerned about, that this didn't end up being a surprise. You need to do something tomorrow. And so I think taking that point on board, we'll look at how we lean into that. And I do take the note that it is a bit difficult for us to go, hey, do this because you have to. And I think that's the point the team has just made.
Yeah, it's actually been a requirement for a property owner to make sure they're, got adequate protection in place, and that's been around for a long while. So that hasn't changed in that sense. It's just obviously how we're, that communication and the policy. But yes, we're pretty well protected, and as I said earlier, we are 100% of the time typically pressurized. So the real risk is not that high, but if it does happen, then you've got to make sure you've got the protections in place.
Rob,
May I share a story?
as long as it's on.
Not funny, it's quite serious.
Is it on point?
That's very relevant. Just to explain backflow risks and that. We purchased our farm about 1992. It's 100 feet above Rahui Road, and it had cows' drinking troughs, which was green. The water was green, just like I'm green at the time. I was green with the experience at the time, and the water inlet, the supply inlet, was town supply from Rahui Road, which was pressured from the pumping station, I believe, in Tasman Road, pressured to, I think, 80 psi to the plateau. But twice a day, the pressure dropped. And you can see if the water is supplied below the water level, if the water goes in, it will go out. And of course, it will siphon down back into the street because there's a negative pressure during the peak hour. So we had a very good plumber, probably the best in New Zealand, and brother. And they put non-return system in where the water supply was put at the top. So during the back pressure time, it would just suck air out. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Yeah. So I thought I'd just share that. And we had a briefing down at the pumping station when I was on the community board 10 years ago, and I raised this issue with D.S. Bassett, and he pointed out that I had him on, and Guru, who was a councillor at the time, said we were building up the immunity of the locals of Otaki. Thank you.
So saying that, I was actually going to ask a question. Did height actually affect this? And you've actually just answered my question. Yep.
Great, thank you. This was live streamed, and we are looking after the public health of Otaki through this conversation. Anyway, so Hardy, great. Awesome, thank you for the presentation. I guess this will come back to us at our future in June in our next council meeting. There's going to be some information that's going to come out to us again with just answering some of those questions that we've had around risk. I would suggest we're probably pretty keen to go the least cost to council and what is the most pragmatic solution to this. So that would be how I think this table operates. So that probably leans you a bit of an indicator of where we'll land, I think. So great, thank you so much for that. We'll call it closed for the day. Thank you for those online, everyone in the